Hola, hola, or depending on what time of day you're listening to this at, buenos dias, buenas tardes, or buenos noches. I am Kat Lopez Shelby. I am the host for Tech and Tequila. If this is the first time you're joining us, you couldn't be joining us at a better time. We are actually on the third episode in this series about, I would say being a local voyager or a world wanderer, and you couldn't have come at a better time. But to get you started, if you haven't listened to Tech and Tequila before, I want to set your expectations. And so just to let you know, what we do is we cover cutting edge technology. We do it all while smooth conversation. So basically, we want to make sure that your tech is not making you want to go grab your favorite alcoholic beverage out of, we'll say pressure is our word of choice now, but more just enjoyment, that you're able to take time off of your business and be able to enjoy your life. And so here we are.
Welcome, and bienvenidos. Thank you for joining us on the podcast, Tech and Tequila. If you don't know who I am, I'm Kat Lopez Shelby, and I'm the founder and CEO of Shelby Technology Solutions. But more importantly, you're here for Tech and Tequila, where we learn a lot about tech, and we may have some nice tequila drinks while we're at it. If you're new here, Tech and Tequila is all about everything technology based for your business. So what that means is we have suppliers on here to talk about how they can help you grow your business. We, have mindset coaches on here talking about how to help you grow your business. We're all about business and basically introducing you to different suppliers and different ways that help you within your business.
I want to go ahead and introduce my amazing guest today, Dr. Jenna Clack. If you want to take a moment for someone who's just joining to introduce yourself and give us a little background, I'd love it.
Awesome. Yeah. So my name is Dr. Jenna W. Clack, but I also go by JW. I believe that intertwining fun and enjoyment into your lifestyle makes it much more easy to attain wellness. And really what I help people do is envision and then intuitively produce the life that they're dreaming of. And that starts right now. So my background is in compounding pharmacy and in hormones and how we communicate with our bodies and our environment. That led me through many, many years of consulting and research that is coming to the same conclusion here, that adaptability, enjoyment, connection, and letting yourself really live in whatever that means to you, finding freedom. So that's where my purpose lies and kind of ties in really well. And yeah, that's me so far.
Thank you, Jenna, very much for joining us. Super excited. I would be remiss, because this is called Tech and Tequila, if I didn't go ahead and say, all right, so today we're going to make a little bit, well, it is what I call a traditional tequila drink, but with a little bit of a change to it. And so I'm sure that you have all heard of a tequila sunrise before. It's pretty basic. It doesn't take a lot of ingredients. In fact, you have orange juice, usually grenadine and tequila, and that's pretty much it. But I am actually going to make a fizzy boba tequila sunrise. So I will try to show these in here, right here. So here's my boba at the bottom right here. These are flavored, I would say grenadine, but they have like a cherry strawberry flavor to them. So they go at the bottom of your cup, which you can't see because my cup is in here. And then I have a seltzer water. The one that I prefer happens to be Topo Chico, but any seltzer water will work for this. So you're going to put those in the bottom of your drink. Then you're going to fill it about halfway up with the seltzer water. Then, depending on how sweet or how unsweet or how you prefer it, you're going to go ahead and put your orange juice in. I usually say fill that about a fourth of the way up. And then, of course, you're going to put in 1 ounce or like 1 shot of tequila. And my tequila of choice for today is, once again, I was right. Soda Pasado tequila from Flecho Azul. I don't know why I can't ever get this in the thing. I don't know, but Flecho Azul. I love this. I guess I would say I have a little bit of a personal connection because one of the owners or co-founders of Flecho actually lives in West Texas. But I say that, I make myself a little drink because one of the things that I wanted to cover today with you, Jenna, of course, with your permission, is talking about, we're gonna backtrack a little bit and talk about why you yourself have chosen to live what I would call for you more the world wanderer lifestyle, and
Right.
kind of how that came to be. And then I will follow up with how I kind of fell into more the local Voyager lifestyle.
I
And
love
so,
this. I love it because remember you were traveling with me, like you had picked me up, we were going somewhere and you were talking about me being a digital nomad and traveling. And I was like, but you like probably travel more than I do actually. So it's good to know like these classifications are like different ways of looking at the same thing so that you can find a pattern and then adapt it to your own style. So, yeah, my way of doing it actually was through study of community. And I was studying the leafcutter ants that have chemical communications that are much stronger than verbal or visual. So, I really thought that was an interesting thing. And because I'm studying hormones and our connection and how we can be well as a culture, that really drew me. My plan was to go back and forth. And that is still kind of the feel of how we would do things, is that we want to make sure that we do still keep connections in the places that feel important to us. But what really happened to me is there was a global shutdown and I was in the place that I was coming back and forth to. And we had, but prior to that, the reason I had even gone is we had realized that this life that we had achieved, the entrepreneurial life, helping, doing everything we could, providing for the kids, having good community, doing everything right, left us with actually zero time to enjoy it, and zero freedom to create new choices. We were very locked into that. And so we had already been looking to expand on that, but we probably wouldn't have made such a drastic jump. I wouldn't recommend for people to just leave. That's not, and maybe if you want to do it, that would be the way. I do think that there are some steps that are involved, but for us, what happened is we ended up shut down, and the house that we had beach access. And during the shutdown, it no longer had beach access, and we were really shut off. We were really closed in, and we really understood quickly that allowing the split between locations wasn't going to be possible. There are a lot of things going on stateside that were completely out of our control, and being stuck in another country, you really realize that at that point, your outlet is tech. So we really leaned on tech a lot to be able to continue communications and to be able to at least make those decisions. So I think that's a big thing. So what we realized was that we were not going to be able to go with our original plan. And that's where adaptability. I've been in a lot of leadership organizations and cooperatives to create change. And one of the main things that we'll always come back to is adaptability being a big deal. But I didn't really think about it in my own life being so direct. The good news is that when you do have your lifestyle together and you do have a bigger vision, you can intuitively go through those things. But we had all of our stuff at this house. We shipped a shipping container over with everything we had. And we had to find this other place where, thank goodness, we had friends that were very, very helpful and found us a place up in the cloud forest. So this is our first beginning of this journey, is we moved into the cloud forest, into a home that we finally got fast internet too, but my little broadcasts and reaches out to the world were highly spotty there for a while. But what happened is that we were able to volunteer for an eco-feria and help to get food to people who couldn't get it during the time when everything was closed down. We ended up making really great friends at a restaurant nearby because they had great internet and great food and great energy, everything. And they had just opened right before we moved there. They ended up being some of our best friends. And those connections that you make while finding connection. So finding internet in the jungle, in the cloud forest, you make friends, you find connections while you're finding connection. And then being able to have another go-to when we can't get connection because it shuts down a lot. There's a lot of data interruption issues. So figuring that out actually brought us into finding other people and making those connections. So I will say that it was a really interesting blessing as we all got used to the shutdown, figuring out how to handle what we were going to do. So that's where I started learning all of the tech stuff. We were up on the mount. We call it the mountain house. The clouds would come through our house. It was amazing. But we lost all of our stuff to the mold of the jungle so quickly. It was things you don't think about, right? Things you don't think about bringing, things you don't think about not bringing. So we really had to acclimate to a lot of different climate issues. We also acclimated to different food, to different creatures, bugs and birds, and everything is bigger, even bigger than in Texas, which is crazy. Yeah. But we really found our community in that first location, and then realizing that at a specific time when things are changing in the globe, there are opportunities that are in other areas that we want to experience. And we actually got contracted out to work at a beach, it's like a beach hotel, but it's all events. And so we got contracted out to work with them and to help remodel something that was in town while we were there, because we were there anyways, which was super fun. I got to do painting, which now I'm doing now, like a fun hobby to tie in, integrating, right? So it was really fun to be able to be there. And then as that contract's coming to a close, you get to decide, oh my goodness, I'm here. What am I going to do next? And I think that's the part that most people start at. I think I didn't start that until I was in it. And I would not have optimally or thought about choosing to be away from the country, away from the state, away from, my normal life for so long, or as a regular thing. That wasn't the case for me. However, it felt so natural. It felt so flowy, and it felt so, my lifestyle felt so healthy and accepted by myself and the people around me. So it was beautiful. I couldn't imagine leaving it at that point. And so then we started traveling different biospheres and countries. My mom actually came with me the first time that we moved to location, and we moved up to a beach town, Jaco, and we stayed there for a week or two. And from there, I think it was like the volcano, Guanacaste side, the other side of Costa Rica. We were in 17 different unique locations throughout the country. And we would sometimes not know where we were going until like 3 to 5 days before, because I played the Airbnb game. That's how I did it. I played the Airbnb algorithm as best I could for the most amazing places. And my family is such a teamwork. It ended up all 5 of us. So I have 3 children and my husband and an FJ Cruiser, all of us. That's it. All our stuff. We had stuff strapped to the roof, and we had play toy, like the bins, the flat ones, so that the kids could bring their stuff. And we just really minimized. I think that's what really started it for me, though, Kat. If I were to say like what started it for me, was realizing how much emotion I had tied up in stuff, and how much stuff was in my life. I didn't know how much stuff I had. My garage was full. And when we started to minimize the clutter, and minimize the clutter in your mind, minimize the clutter in your surroundings, minimize the clutter in your emotions, feeling so much connected to so many things that you're not even thinking about energetically. That was before we started minimizing at all, probably 2 years before we ever considered going even back and forth. And I'll tell you, I said something to a friend the other day where I said, it's amazing. I've gotten rid of all my stuff. When we left that beach hotel, I left all of like bins and bins and bins of clothes. We sold all of our remaining appliances, our gym, whatever else we had. And I'll tell you, it's been 3-ish years since that point. And I am so abundant. I still have so much, no matter how much I give away. I give away, sell, trade, leave here, do this, whatever it is along the way, because that is how we did it. We started with everything. And along the way, we made our way into nomadism. That was truly like that. When we came back to the States, we had 10 bags total for our family of 5. And I couldn't imagine going back to a lifestyle of being connected to stuff unintentionally. And I didn't know that meant I would end up being a global traveler. And now we're, in 7 days going to Spain for at least 3 to 8 months is how it's going, right? I missed the adventure in the everyday because I am so disciplined in the things that I'm providing on purpose. So I think that if you have that discipline in the things you're providing on purpose and discipline in the lifestyle, that sometimes that escape, that adventure could be destructive if you don't put it in a way that is aligned with you. So I feel like this was a giant blessing. I do feel like, as we've been talking, I've gained a lot of skills about adaptability and lifestyle and being able to continue on your purposeful path while things are shifting. And I think that's, first of all, a good skill for anyone, for anyone. And then the part of me that ends up global is the richness of somewhere completely unimaginable to you being integrated somehow into your life just a little bit. I'm addicted to that. That is for sure. I love that feeling of being able to be in a new space time completely. And I think that's what it does for me. But it really, if I were to plan it again, I would say that I would still plan what I'm doing now. I just wouldn't have known that, right? I would have never been able to know that at that point. So hopefully, us going through these different types of nomads and like telling our stories will help people understand I'm not necessarily the example of exactly how to do it. I do know what not to do, how to get around it, and what to do now, right? Like, if you want to be more clear in that vision. It's really interesting to be a lifestyle consultant in this space, because I heard from almost everyone, and you reflected this, you're the one that brought this back into me, I guess last week, is that what people are really looking for is that freedom and not to be so tied down. So to me, that started with the stuff. Really, it started with the things that I had, the collection of my, then I added a bedroom, my 4-bedroom home with a garage and an extended closet for all my freaking clothes, and the ceiling at the perfect color with the comforter. And I still like aesthetics, so don't get me wrong. When I'm shopping, I'm shopping. However, it's not something that I need to own and hold on to. And it's funny, when you stop owning and holding on to things, how you feel more free. And for me, that's kind of what this all tied into. So.
No, and I think that is a really good example as far as like that, however you get into, we'll call the digital nomad lifestyle, or, wanderlust, nomadic, whatever term you want to use. And not even saying digital, let's just say not being geographically bound to one location. It's all individual. And so kind of like what we were talking about, I never thought of myself as someone who is more of, that, whereas I kind of fall under the local Voyager because, just my personal preference is I don't like to travel anywhere I cannot physically drive myself to. And I always say this, I'm from the great state of Texas. So me to drive like 5 or 6 hours is not that big of a deal, and, my path is it's definitely different from yours, and kind of has a little bit of a different background, because even prior to me choosing this lifestyle, like going in and saying, this is what I know I'm going to do going forward, I had worked for different companies. And when I had worked for those companies, my territory had always been relatively large. And so like when I worked for one company, I covered New Mexico and I covered El Paso and, I covered all these places. So I was still traveling around, and working from all these different locales. And kind of my path this way came more, I would say, a little bit out of necessity. Some of it has to do with those connections. For people who I say, for people who know me, I actually used to live in the Austin area, and then due to getting a job change with a major lec, which I say a major lec, I work for AT&T, I moved to West Texas, and I was there for a long time. Don't get me wrong. I'm not really sure of how many years, but it was a long time. And through that path, like when there had been opportunities for me to per se leave West Texas prior to this most recent time, it had never just been right. Like one time my son was about to graduate from high school. So I was like, oh, this is not ideal. We'll, try this. But you fast forward, and really some of it I think is just pure alignment with a slash of alchemy and manifestation, if we're being very transparent. And some of it is, I am somebody who thinks that family and community and, what we talk about, which is freedom, is extremely important. And give or take, approximately 2 years ago, my mom had a stroke, and, my mom is older. She's almost 80. And just with the I would say delicacy. That's not really the way to say that. That makes it sound like a comida. But with the fact that, the prognosis that she had after that, and just between myself and my husband wanting kind of a change, we found our way that, like, hey, this is how we're going to move forward. And the reason that I always say that it's kind of like alchemy and like manifestation is that I've been talking about it, the desire to move, for like a long time. And I was like, I just don't think, and we never saw a path forward. And literally my husband went to go apply for a job. He actually applied for 3 separate jobs. He had 3 interviews, and 2 of them were in West Texas and 1 was in Austin. And literally from the time he went to the interview, he was driving back to West Texas. They called him and were like, okay, when can you start? Whereas the other 2 were like, we're trying to get approvals and, whatever. And I was like, I mean, to me, it was meant to be. I would say that aspect was very smooth. The actual like transition from like, okay, we're here and how we're going to get here was not as smooth. And I like to be very transparent with it, and it was everything from our house didn't sell as quickly as we anticipated to, I mean, like, when I say our house didn't sell, like we had 3 separate contracts on our house and like 2 of them fell through, and, just like one thing after the other. But I think that the side note of that is where it's very important. I want to use the term commitment, to be committed to how you're moving forward, but also to having that open mindset. And I say that because obviously I still travel. I travel all within Texas. I go to Houston, I go to Dallas, I go to San Antonio, and I go to West Texas. And I'm usually there once or twice a month, give or take. And, the house that we're working on there is still not finished. So I'm like, you have to keep an open mindset about everything and be like, you know what, everything's going to happen in the exact right time. That's exactly how it's going to work.
You really, Kat, you hit on something that I want to really, I think this is just life skills in general, and it's just a good place to show it. Like you have that ability to be adaptable, and it's 2 things, like you said, it's not one or the other. It's keeping your commitment. And to me, immediately, I think to values, because so easily you can keep a commitment to a situation. So keeping the commitments to the values, and then being open-minded on how you reach that. Because when we had this opportunity, we have to decide, what are we going to do as a family? How are we going to maintain ourselves here when we're not expected to be here and stay safe and healthy? And a lot of that really came up to, my traditional training as a compounding pharmacist, and then in anti-aging metabolic functional medicine. And what I believe and what I intuitively believe, those values were all at play in those moments of deciding, and sticking to the values is what I think kept this going forward. If I would have tried to make the situation right over my values, it would have been different. So same in your situation. Like if in this situation, you were looking at so logically and not looking at what you actually align with and where your values are, you might still be there, and you want to be in another location. You want to be traveling the way you do. So I think that's really important to think about, not just like one or the other, but like the commitment and open-minded.
Yes. And I think to follow up with that, one of the things that is like, I am a very person, like, and I would get in trouble for saying, but I'll call it my Nike philosophy. So, don't use it against me. I know it's copyrighted, all the good stuff, but it's like, at some point you just have to do it. You have to take action. And I think it's very interesting because I have a really good friend who is like the planner of planners of planners. And she's like, I have this 5-year plan. And I'm like, well, I mean, I have a 5-year, what I would like to happen in 5 years, but I'm also very realistic. And not to go back to 2020, but I think if 2020 has taught us anything, it's that, whether it's the world or life or whatever, things happen, and you really have to like, have that on to philosophy and be willing to ride that wave and be like, here's ultimately what my goals are and how are we going to make them happen? Like, and for some people,
no, like the epigenetics of that are so beautiful, because people wait to practice something But like, if you wait to practice, you'll never get good at it. And we forget that that's a way of life as well. So we think, well, I'm going to wait until I get to this point, and all of a sudden, I'm going to do it. So when you're saying just do it, it applies in this context of when you're ready to make that move. It's the small thing you do today to move on that plan. Because I totally hear what you're saying. Everybody has a beautiful 5-year plan of all these things, but until you start taking those steps, that the broken down version where you like break down the steps and you start checking them off, that's the just do it part. That's the action part where you don't see the end, and it might look nothing like you thought it would in the beginning, kind of like a painting. Like you have an idea of what it's going to be. When it all comes together, it's always better, but it's almost never what you thought it was. So it's a really interesting thing, like to take that small action every single day, because thinking that I'm going to do it all of a sudden when I haven't practiced it, your body doesn't know how to do that. You don't know how to do that. It literally is practice for the game. It's like meditating so you don't freak out, or exercising so you can walk 3 miles, or whatever it happens to be. It's so practical to think about that, honestly.
No, and I agree. And I think this leads into kind of where we left off last week, which was we kind of talked about like what apps you want to use and things you want to think about. But this is the practicality of once you decide like, okay, this is how I'm going to move forward, is what does that look like? And I'll take it for a moment and I talk about, the tech, and I talk about like how you want to think of your technology stack as a layered cake. If you're doing a drinking game, do not do it to me saying layered cake and talking about how your tech is in layers, because this is definitely, if you're doing that, don't listen to this till after 5 p.m. But I say that because, you want to talk about how are you connecting to the internet, and kind of like what you were describing earlier, like you got to be really good friends with this person that had a restaurant because of the fact that they had solid internet there and great food, which was a bonus.
And the vibes. Vibes. We would not have known if we didn't spend so much time there at first. So
mm-hmm. Exactly. And so you want to think, there's the connectivity, and probably right beside that is how do you personally work like effectively? And I say that because I was actually just looking at some posts today where someone was talking about one of the things that they struggled with initially was they were like, oh, I've got this great internet where I'm staying. I'm just going to work from being inside the house, to discover like, oh, I'm not as productive here. Like I actually have to physically get out and go someplace like a co-working space, or, and I'm thinking more in the States, but, almost in every major metropolitan place, there's, a Capital One cafe, or, there's Starbucks, and there's Summer Moon, and there's like all these different coffee shops, right? And if you're not looking at coffee shops, you've got the different co-working spaces. I mean, a lot of, if you're staying in an Airbnb that is in like an apartment complex or in some kind of like multi-dwelling unit, a lot of times they have a co-working space. But the second to that is, you've got WeWork, and you've got Regus, and you've got, the numerous different ones. I think there's one in West Texas called like, I know there's Second Story Co-working, but there's another one and I cannot think of the name, but they're like all around. And for some that like, with a majority of positions these days, right,
mm-hmm.
is there's so many different variables. And we per se won't get into the whole discussion about people who want you to be in the office once or twice a week, but we're talking specifically about thinking about your tech stack and kind of thinking about how am I going to work? How am I going to connect? And just like use this for example, we're on the podcast today is like, okay, so I was going to go work in the co-working space that's here where we're at, but there was like 5 people in there. So it wasn't really a good fit for me to do this right here. It's,
I'll never forget, I did a sweaty podcast because I thought I had this hotel room that I had booked. I actually booked outside to make sure I had stable internet where I was staying. We were in a very remote location. And when I went in there, they started having this big celebration in the main area that I was supposed to be able to work in, and I couldn't work there. So I went and sat under a tree, but it was not, I remember being so hot and sweaty. There was a way around it, right? Adaptable, but it is interesting to think about that you're not in this office setting. And when you said like how you work best, I honestly work really, really amazingly at the beach or at a cafe or at somewhere, because a lot of my work is research. I'm not always, face to face. That's the end product of it. So it was interesting. Getting internet at the beach is not something that I had thought about, right? And being able to make those connections, that's something that it's not probably common, but it is interesting to think that people do work all different ways and might prefer like an office type setting as opposed to a home or outdoors or whatever. And the fact that we can do it all now, I think we kind of like take that for granted a little bit. I want to be like, no, seriously though, I worked at the beach a lot. That's amazing,
No, and I always say this because I myself have worked at the beach. I was at Playa de Carmen on a trip for like a week. Ironically, I had a really good friend that won this trip, and I was one of the only other people, and I say only other people, not that we weren't friends, but that was like, hey, I can go with you, because I have the ability to. Yeah, I've got the freedom, and there's nothing like working from your balcony and like closing deals and feeling relaxed and hearing the ocean. And, and sometimes for me, it's just as simple as going and like at the pool area where we're at, they have, tables and stuff, is sitting down with my computer right by the pool and just listening to the water or listening to what's around me. That's not to say, by the way, I did have a similar experience to you, because the first episode of this season's podcast, I had not made it all the way home yet. I was recording it outside of Summer Moon because that was the only spot I could find where there wasn't like 18 people around me. And then as soon as I get started, number one, it's hot because it's Texas. And number two, a diesel pulls up right behind me. And, they just leave their vehicles on. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect.
I mean, it's very on theme for starting in Texas, for sure.
It is. It's definitely on theme. And, that leads to the thing, once you get past connectivity, you want to think about how are you protecting yourself. So you want to think about, a cloud-based firewall. You want to think about a VPN. You want to think about email security. You want to get into those thoughts. And I really like a discussion I was having with one of my clients that is looking to start doing a lot more working in, I say remote environments, but travel basically. And we were talking about how the things that are really top of mind for them is one, so I'll say three. We'll say three things. It's connectivity, it's protecting themselves, in the cyber realm. And then three, it's backing up everything so that if they're out and about, like, how do I access this? How do I keep from losing it? And what does that look like? So.
Okay. Well, what's interesting, and I just thought about this, is that when we were in all of that mess, why I didn't have as much to mess with as far as technology is we had planned on being able to go back and forth. So we had some of the systems in place. There were a lot of adjustments that we had to make, but we at least had the systems in place. And it just hit me when you were saying that about that layered approach, because those things had been considered. And there's such a peace of mind and like a freedom in the way that you're moving through when it's been taken care of. It's like being in a good relationship. That's why you have a consultant anyways, right? You're in a good relationship with someone who's thinking about those layers of protection. And like, same thing with me. The reason you have me as a lifestyle consultant is so you don't have to worry about if you're doing the thing that's best for you. We can make sure we've individualized that's best for you. And we're doing it on the spiritual, on the mental, and on the physical level. So I've never thought of it as a layer cake. I do maybe I'm like, the evangelical past of my childhood is always a trinity. Like everything's always three. So does your cake then had three layers, but does it always have three layers, or is it dependent on what your thing is, or are those like the main three ingredients and then you stack?
Yeah, I was going to say those are like the main three ingredients and then you stack, because I think, for me, obviously, my background is tech, and what I strive to be for all my clients is their trusted technology advisor. And what does that mean? That means that, I look over the breadth of the 600 plus solutions that I have, obviously with the help of what I like to say, engineers that are specific to whether that's cloud or hosted voice or, whatever it may be, and find out what is going to work best for you and your company. And then on the flip side of that is, I always tell people tech is going to tech sometimes. And anybody who has done any type of project management, and I'm sure you can speak to this from the pharmacy, any type of project, things are going to go astray, and you want to have someone that you can call and be like, okay, I don't know what's going on. They said they're going to splice the fiber on this day. They said this is going to happen. It's not happening. I'm not getting anywhere. I advocate for my clients, and I'm like, okay, I take that on. And, I was going to say, sorry, my brain kind of like, the second place I was going to go with this is the other reason that I'm obviously am pro having a consultant is because we keep up with the latest trends in tech. And I mean, obviously we all know that we're kind of at warp speed in tech when it comes to AI, but I mean, we're warp speed in tech when it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to how you communicate with your customers, when it comes to, we like to call double encryption, right? And we were speaking about that with some of the apps, is things that you think about, like, is this app have double encryption? Does this fall under, and for somebody who does any type of consulting in the medical field, is this going to cover me for compliance and regulatory regulations that I have?
Exactly.
So those things.
No, I mean, I think that's when you talk about the consultant piece, I think that what is so important is having someone who not only has the background, the intention, the purpose, and that being a drive for goodness in the world. I feel like that's the core of what all of that is, but it is ultimately keeping up with the latest trends and running them through all of that discernment so that you don't even have to think about it. I know medicine is at least 17 to 20 years behind the discoveries we have. And at that point, we're in a whole new biosphere, a whole new culture, a whole new interaction and lifestyle. So having someone on that cutting edge, like you say, with AI being so quick to move everything forward, having someone with the discernment of how it developed and understanding the mechanism of action, as I would say, like how it's working behind the scenes, that is the true value. It's the freedom that you gain from the strife and the anxiety of not knowing, am I protected in tech? And for me, am I protected in my lifestyle? Am I protected in the way that I am moving through life? Am I going to feel like I am full of well-being and purpose? And that's really cool is that I didn't ever, I knew there were big things happening. You always kind of like see things coming together. However, the way that tech and lifestyle have come together, we're more direct. There was like, because this app does that, but what it's been is it allows more well-being, because when you have that security and you have it set up right, you don't have to worry about it. It's not like your primary concern. And you know how it's optimal to live for you and how you can optimally handle and ride the waves in pressure times or whatever. And, optimally give your body what it needs as far as that's concerned. I think tech has done more of a foundation building for us being able to explore that well-being and lifestyle. It hasn't been so direct, but it's been enabling this lifestyle of not being so tied down to a geographical location or a set of circumstances.
I wanted to follow up with that before I kind of lead us in a little bit of a different direction. And I really couldn't agree more, because I think of tech, and obviously I talk about connectivity kind of being the base of everything. Like, how do you connect to the internet? How do you connect to your clients? How do you connect to your family? But I can't think of, prior to obviously today, and in 6 months or a year from now, I'll probably say 6 months or a year from now, that we have a better way to be able to create that community and not necessarily be in the same physical location as that. And I use the example of, and there's so many different groups, whether they're networking groups, like whether it's Entreprenista or the Amigahood, or, I'm trying to think
of the Moving to Spain Facebook group.
Exactly. Like whatever the group is, there's so many different communities.
That's where the T is. Like you know about the general vibe and what you might be served, but the T, that's in those little Facebook groups that are at the location. So I definitely cross-reference any of my Airbnb or stays with groups. But you're right. Like, how many are there?
Yeah. But how many are there, and how many are there can you become a part of? And I always say that you get out of things what you put into them, right? So, if you join 15 groups and you're spending 2 minutes on each, are you really creating that much of a sense of community? Probably not. But if you say, okay, so I'm a member and I'm just going to use 5 groups because it's an easy number for me. It's like, I'm going to be active on this group on Monday, and I'm active on this group on Tuesday, and go through and actually spend some time. I'm not saying that that's the only thing that you're doing, but you're setting
Right.
aside like, okay, for 30 minutes, I'm going to interact with people and I'm going to reach out and create that environment.
No, I think it's a good thing to remember that you forget that it can be lonely when you're in that situation. I personally am like I'm a recluse. I don't really, very oddly love being by myself. And
Mhm.
it's a lot to be out. But I will tell you that what helps for me is when I'm traveling, to be in a location that is very walkable, because I can integrate that into my life of running into people that I see and feel community with. But if you're
Mhm.
somewhere that's more remote, it is really good to be intentional and make sure that you're doing that. And if you're just a more online or more social person, I think it's really important, like what you said there, to build the connections intentionally. And what's cool is you really get to filter exactly, like you get to choose your
Mhm.
favorite situations, your favorite interactions, which is from so many. I think that's so beautiful to be able to do.
Yes, I can. I mean, that's huge to me. Is like, and you know, and I will say, as you know, I'm on the older spectrum. I'm closer to 50 than I am to 40. Just being very transparent to everyone out there. I have discovered that we all have very busy lives. Like, you know that just as well as I do. And
Right.
it's you know, they're still making a point of making that time to connect with people that you want to connect with. And, you know, I consider myself an ambivert. I don't even know if that's really like a true statement. It's just what I've always heard, which means that sometimes I like to be out and about and around people, and other times I need to just take some time, be by myself, and just hibernate and refresh.
I think it's
So,
important to just say real quick. I'm my human design in the little thing is I'm a hermit and a heretic. I like to be either all by myself or I like to go out and really put on the show and be there, but I don't do that as much, right? And I think
mhm.
that you understanding how you would describe yourself, I understanding that self-understanding is probably the number one ingredient that I don't think we've really just said that, but I think self-understanding is the number one ingredient in any type of moving forward. It's success in your lifestyle, finding your bliss, achieving your dreams, whatever you want to say. I feel like that self-awareness is always available for more. You can always know yourself more. So I feel like that's
Mhm.
a really important thing to think about. So you know how to handle these things that you're adapting to. You're okay, you're
Mhm.
kind to yourself.
Well, and I think one of the things that I think is so important, and this actually kind of leads into what was one of the topics that I wanted to make sure that we touched on today, because you and me both fall under the consultant category, you know, for the most part, you know, whether that, you know, whatever that looks like, right?
Right, right.
But it's as you look into this lifestyle, whether you're going to be, you know, a local Voyager or a world wanderer, is, you know, what are you going to do for work and what are your options? And, you know, obviously we have, you know, UCG content and influence. I don't know if we'll say influencer, but let's just say
Right.
influencer adjacent type things. Um, there are also quite a few companies that are willing to allow you to work remote these days. And, you know, and there's a whole big industry around that. So, um, you know, what are some of the things that you see that people are doing and being able to work this way, and where you've seen people be successful as they're like, hey, here's my journey and this is part of my plan?
It's so funny that the first thing I thought of is so old school, and they've been working from home forever, is medical coding and billing. Like that's a legit thing, and people are really still doing that mess, right? Like there's all kinds of things that you're thinking about that are behind the scenes. It's a lot of tech related stuff. In the medical field, I see more like customer call center, even like demonstrating new tech to someone. So you don't have to be actually that techie. It's more of a personal relationship type of thing. Lots of that type of customer service background work. I know that when I had been recruited and worked in logistics for a while, there's opportunities that are not completely remote, but can be over time, as far as trucking, right? So that's something that I wouldn't have thought of as a first thing, but pretty much any large company right now is going to be trending toward that type of work. And you also have the work where we wanted to have a longer visa where we're staying in the global side. So there's on the ground work to get a visa. So my husband has a certification to teach English. he only has to teach 15 hours a week. And that helps us get to be able to be in the country and have more opportunity there. So I think there are also a lot of things to think about. Teaching English, an online job as well. That's a big one, because when I was in Costa Rica, a lot of people were teaching English. And then you do have all of the self-brand marketing things. I will say that there tends to be either it's your own company and you're doing really well, or you're working for another company that's a big company that's doing well. But I do say that the people who tend to sign up for the pay my own way, pay a fee to be in the game, that tends to be a little bit more difficult while you're also learning to travel. I wouldn't do those two at the same time personally. But as far as like opportunities, I mean, mostly customer service and background tech things that I don't even know what that they are. So the tech world has a lot of options, but the medical world has a lot of options in consulting. Also, insurance companies and pharma are hiring a lot in that. If you're more in the traditional medical side, I see lots of opportunities for remote work as far as that's concerned.
Well, and I was going to say too, I see a lot of what I think falls under like VA virtual assistants. And
that's true.
And I was going to say, and I specify this because I know people who work with, I actually have someone that's in one of my networking groups that owns basically a virtual assistant agency. And she has people that are just virtual assistants for real estate and people that are just virtual assistants for this. And while that still kind of falls under the customer service and this, there is no, like, you do not have to physically be in any particular location. I know that we talked about this last time. You still want to take into consideration, okay, so whether I'm a 1099 or I'm an actual W-2 employee, that's kind of going to be how your path that you choose. But you want to think about what is the time frame that, like, let's say you're working for a company in the UK or in Australia. You want to realize, like, okay, if I'm in the States, it's Monday on Sunday. And, it might be 2 a.m. there, but it's 6 p.m. here. Like, you want to understand the time conversion on that as well.
And not only the time conversion, but how cognizant you're going to be able to be and what you're going to be able to do. It's people are so confident of themselves traveling large distances and staying on the same schedule and being in the same headspace. And I think being honest with yourself, especially if you're working for a large company who's really counting on you for those things, and mess that. If you're working for yourself, if you're working for anybody, it's really just, it's important to think about being compassionate with yourself when you're making the plans and not over planning and not thinking about the time change is a huge thing because it is a day ahead or a day behind in a lot of instances, right? It's not, I'm 2 hours late for my meeting. It's, I've completely missed the entire day, which, yeah, I guess is something that seems simple, but even just the 1 hour change where Costa Rica does not observe a daylight savings time. And so when the time changes in Texas and I was there, everything on my schedule had to be switched, which seemed like a little thing, but it wasn't.
Yeah. Well, and I think, that's true. Universally, I'm not a fan of the time change, by the way. I'm just going to put that out into the universe that we just need to do away with it. It serves no purpose. And I think it's Arizona that doesn't have the time change anymore. Like, I know there's like a particular state.
I feel like they would know how the sun's affecting us. I feel like they would that's so funny.
I'm like, I feel like, yeah, but no. And I've run into this, and I think I'm pretty well, I've told this story. Like, I have been on calls at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I am not the most cognizant person at 4 a.m. So I have to be very, very conscious. Like, some people are like sunrise people and some people are sunset people. And I would rather be on a call at 11:30 p.m. than a call at like 2:30 or 3 a.m. So those are definitely things to think about. And I think going back to something that we talked about before is, let's say you do work for a particular company and you have made this decision. What is the group? I would say you need to look into what is the process for your company that's going to say, okay, yes, you can do this. And I know with like some places, they're like, okay, but once a quarter you have to come here, or once a year for like their big, we'll say SKO, sales kickoff, or their big, once a year thing. So those are things to keep in mind as well.
Well, like the travel back and forth, I think understanding for my side of like the travel back and forth side, if you're moving across, the company thing is totally awesome, but there's a whole different location rule. So it's the geographical boundaries. You want to be really clear about what those geographical boundaries are so that you're in compliance with whatever field that you're in. And I think that that's something that we kind of breeze over sometimes and be like, oh, it'll be okay. But the data is so different in different countries. So I think that that's something to be clear on. And like you said, the timing stuff doesn't seem like the biggest deal until you're planning your life. And I think that it's much more important than we can imagine. And some of the things that I say, like teaching English, most of those jobs, when you're online and it's time for them to be learning, it's 4 a.m. here, right? It's 2 a.m. It's something like that. So I think that when you're choosing your remote job, which again, how many are there, Kat? Like, what do you think? That's what when you said, like, what ones have I seen? I literally think I can see almost anything. It's just specifics around the details. That's what it's going to be. You can pretty much do any job. Obviously there are things that are physical and location bound, but largely the world is moving in a different direction. So do you know what you think would be the most I think consultant's a pretty good way to go, but that's very limited in what you're able to do as far as like, you have to have an extensive education in a specific field. So what ones, if you had to start over, if you had to like go do something, what would you do?
I think for me, that's a good question. I don't know. I would say I don't know the answer to that, but I would definitely probably still take like the 1099 route, maybe like a virtual assistant route or something, which to me, I mean, because we didn't even cover like, I say like, we didn't even cover, I sound like I'm from California. We did not even cover that there are virtual CISOs and there are virtual CFOs. And for a lot of these larger companies, whether that has to do with that particular person wanting to be remote, or it has to do with the expense of that company hiring another C-level suite virtually versus having somebody that is, you know, like let's say 8 hours a month or so many hours that they're looking over, you know.
I know board seats have been up a lot more that way. Board seats have been a lot more. We're not going to board meetings. We're having the online Zoom meetings. And so those positions might be something that people haven't thought about if you've got something to contribute to any type of a board in any industry, really.
Yeah, I would say the big thing is for me, it's looking at the contracts that are out there and knowing what all is available, because you never really know until you get into it, you know. And I think it kind of like, I think of it this way, you know, it falls just within like what I do in consulting. I know people who consult that solely work with people in the medical field. And I know people that consult that solely work with people in oil and gas. And I was just looking the other day, and there's a company with a very similar name to mine that solely just works with transportation and software to do with transportation. So I mean, I don't want to say niche down, but I think it's thinking about what's your niche, what you feel comfortable, and what you can bring to the table. And there's a lot of things that you see online right now where it talks about, you know, tech is the way to go. And if you go into tech, you're looking at like software engineers, sales, AI engineers, like there's just so much opportunity out there. I'm not saying that, you know, you can step into those positions without doing training or without maybe, I like to say we started at the bottom, now we're here, but you know,
For
you know
sure.
what I'm saying? Yeah, we start, but you may need to start, you have to start somewhere to get somewhere, right?
Well, and I think that's the thing about just do it, like jumping into it, is when you're certain that you would value the freedom more than you value the monotony of what's happening, that's when you'll make the step. And having the plan in place and brainstorming, for the word that I grew up with, but it's just getting all of the ideas out there, looking, like you said, you don't know what's out there till it's out there, allowing yourself that open-mindedness, and then going back and tidying up and saying, this wouldn't work for me. This isn't acceptable. This is not. And kind of sorting through it. Then you get to that point where we're on the third of the series, where it's like, okay, now I'm going to go and I'm going to commit to it. I'll be open-minded about how I go, but I know what's out there and I know what works for me. I feel like that gives you a lot more confidence.
Yes. And I think too, the thing is, added with that is adaptability and pivoting and mindset. Those are, you know, I would say 3 things that are very important because, you know, I mean, whether it's like me trying to, you know, deal with my whole passport situation, and I say situation because it's like, I'm having to jump through several hoops because of changes that they made to the passports since I was adopted, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. But you know what I mean?
My
It's
husband's at the passport office today, BT Dubs in Houston.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying, though. It's like those things right there. It's like, understanding like, okay, this is what we have to do and here's what we have to do. Because, there's all like long form, short form, this visa, this, go over there with a tourist and then apply, or, and kind of like, okay, so we have 3 different paths in front of us. What are we going to do? I almost say that once you get to this point and you've made the decision, I'm like a person who likes to create like a bubble thing where you say, this is what I want, and here are all the options, and here's how to make it happen. But like I do that with my business sometimes. If something feels stale or it's not working, and I'm like, this is clearly not working, how do we pivot? And what do we do to fix it? And is it fixable? Or do we need to just cut that off and stop? And a lot of times
I didn't think about this, but what you're telling me is actually like, it sounds like you're being hard on yourself, but if you're hard on yourself, it won't work. You have to be compassionate when you're doing that, when you're saying, oh, I'm going to change this stuff, right? Like, because you did it and now you're going to have to go again. And I think that a lot of people won't admit, I need to go a different way. And I think that's a strength to consider as well, is like when you're saying the adaptability, it's not only just because you have to. A lot of it is to make it more of what you want it to be.
Well, that's true. More, and I guess that's a good point, more what you want it to be. Like, and there is something I was watching recently for someone who is, and I'm giving you the background, demographics to have an understanding. Somebody who's late 20s, early 30s, that's single, that moved to Paris, that was like, I want to be very realistic with you. I moved here, love Paris, but this is like the last 3 months have been very hard for me. And specifically said, this has been hard, not because I'm having issues with my work, because I'm not, that's all going good. Not because I'm not building a community, I am building a community, but I miss my family. And I know that I'm not going to be like at this point with decisions I made, I'm not going to be able to see them for a year. And so I think that this falls under mindset and giving yourself grace and allowing yourself to feel that and be like, hey, this is not working. Number one, I call it the 3 A's or whatever, where it's like acknowledge, accept, and take action. But it's here's what's going on. How do we fix this? Is it fixable?
Well, and also like you said about feeling the emotion, I think that compassion also comes with, we have this false, especially with digital nomad stuff, because it plays out the lifestyle and the wellness and all of this stuff is like, or tech or whatever. Nothing's ever going to go wrong. It's all going to be perfect. It's all great. Since you have this down, you'll never have a problem again, But the whole adventure in it is finding that adaptability and utilizing what you've learned and letting those lessons come forward so that when you feel those really deep emotions, you can say, this is like very good terminology to think about, is I can hurt without suffering, and it's okay to hurt. That's something that happens. That's part of this flux. And to allow the emotion and say, like, not compassionate, like it's okay that you feel bad, but just like, damn, isn't it cool you feel? Isn't that awesome that you feel and you have that much passion within you? And maybe fixing it is just letting it happen and then moving into the inspired action as soon as you can, which is the same thing you said, but just in the way that I hear it. But I think that like having that ability to recognize that the wave is what makes it a ride. And there's that bottom point is not necessarily bad. It's just negative. It's not bad. It's just negative. It's allowing it to come back to the positive. It has to happen as part of the flow. And I don't think it would be the same without it. I do think that those moments where you realize, I love my family. I love my friends. I wish I could have them in my pocket. That's a really cool feeling. But if you don't know that what's going on, it could crash a week, a month, 2 months, a year, right?
And I think that's so powerful. And I actually think that that is the best spot for us to end this session on, because, we've covered kind of the path to how we both became, we'll say digital nomadic or, wanderers or wanderlust or nomads. And then, covering different options for you, things to think about, to be open to. And then also, I think, you round it out with, feeling those emotions and understanding, kind of that vibe and riding that wave. And I think that a lot of that has to do with life. And I think that is universal for not just digital nomads. I think that's for, if you own your own business, and I say that if anybody who's in sales understands what riding a wave is like, because sometimes you're up and sometimes you're not so up, and it's how are you effective and how do you move forward when you're more on the bottom half of it so that you can get to that up, right? It's
Right.
Okay, so we've got this and we need to get from point A to point B. And I always think of, I was on a call with a gentleman who worked with Gary Vee, who was like, I could literally go to Gary Vee and be like, here's the deficit we face, and let's say it's, I don't know, $200,000. Like, we're down $200,000. We have to get this within like the next 45 days. And I'm not saying universally that like everyone can do this, but Gary Vee like, all right. And he would like I say magically, but he had the capability, the critical thinking skills to figure out like, here's the deficit. How do we start to chip away at that? Like, how do we make this happen? And I think this same thing goes with, as you look into this lifestyle, is when you have one of those downs, is how do you chip away and say, okay, so right now I'm feeling this. I'm allowing myself to feel it. But I know in 6 months I'm going to see my family, or I know I'm going to go home for a week, or you know what, my family's coming to see me in 6 months. It's kind of figuring all those things out, as using the example I was talking about.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that anyone who's looking to find more freedom, there's lots of paths. You don't have to be a digital nomad, but if you've ever thought about being location independent, and I say like non-localized, I'm a local here in my hometown, and everywhere else I'm non-localized, right? So I feel like that feels good. If you're looking for that, there are more and more clear paths and more opportunities and more people who have done it ahead of you. And there's a lot of skills, tools, and just the availability for this freedom and blissful lifestyle. It's available now. And I think that is incredibly inspiring. No matter how you look at it, there is that opportunity to be had. And I hope more people jump on and don't just, think about it, that they're moving into those. It's the next steps.
Yes. And I thought that we would end on this because it is obviously Hispanic Heritage Month, because we are in September and it just passed September 17th. So I did talk about the Amiga Hood and why you can't see this, and you can see this, you can. The Amiga Hood has a product called the Amigo Circle. It's give or take $44, and it is a set of cards that they have, and they're meant to like create community and ask questions. And so they have, some of them say heal, some of them say commune, and some of them say grow. And I thought that we would take a moment to just, which honestly, the one that I picked. So this is a commune card. I can't get it in the screen because I'm not talented enough, but I love that it says this. It says, what helps you feel empowered?
So cheesy. Two things. It's real cheesy. Getting in a vibratory state. So either gong meditation, straight meditation outside, really quieting myself makes me feel more in control or powered than anything else. And then right after, you have to do a horribly energetic dance session with all of your favorite, for me, hip hop beats for like 10 minutes. You have to sing the lyrics. You have to lip sync to yourself in the mirror. You have to really dance, move your hips. I never feel more empowered than when I give myself those little bits of time. It's so simple, but I always feel best when I allow myself to kind of move in my own rhythm and shit. It feels like a community within myself. So I feel like I'm connected to the whole world, and that feels really empowering to me personally.
Yeah. No, I like that. That's definitely, those are good philosophies. I was going to say how Selma Hayek for you, because she said that before about like getting out and just dancing, like nobody's watching you, to change your vibration and your mood.
I like my company. That's
yeah.
good.
I would say that I would add, sometimes it is just taking a moment to either do some breath work or meditate, or I like to say take a little nappy nap to reset that nervous system. I'm not talking like an hour and a half, but maybe like sit down for like 15, 20 minutes and just rest for a second.
Let your brain remember you can do it.
Exactly. Let your brain remember. I always say that, I used to always say at the end of the day, everything always works out. And now I have defaulted to saying, just like at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, everything always works out in my favor. So snaps to that. I wanted to finish this off. First off, for anyone who this is your first time joining Tech and Tequila, I ask that you do 3 things. 1, recommend it to your friends. 2, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast however you choose to watch this, whether it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. And 3 is definitely make sure that you catch next week's episode. Now, I want to preface that we are 3 into a series, and because of logistics, we will either have the last or 4th session of this series come out next week or the following week. Just because, I was going to say life, but you were traveling to Spain, and I am working on being able to podcast in the wild from a fun spot. Like I say,
I'm so excited. It's so good. It's worth the disruption for the flow that's on the way. Mm-hmm. So that's so exciting.
I love it. I absolutely love it. So if we don't have you on the very next one, which I look forward to, we will have either Fortify or Coro talking about some cybersecurity, some things that we've talked about before, and Fortify talking about connectivity and, all the plethora of supplies that we offer. Thank you again, Jenna. I appreciate you being on, and I look forward to everything that's happening in your life and like everything in the future. Yay.
So big. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Tech and Tequila. I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. To stay updated about all things tech and more, don't forget to visit us at our website, shelbyts.com. If you loved what you heard, remember to show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our podcast. Your 5-star ratings and reviews mean the world to us and help us to reach more listeners just like you. So muchas gracias again for joining us with Tech and Tequila. Thank you so much. You learned a lot about tech, and maybe you had a nice drink of tequila.